Welcome to Wine Soundtrack South Africa. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world. In 30 answers, discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack, this is Morena Kalo, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Alison Pearce from Nalu Wines. Alison, a very warm welcome. Can you tell me a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, hi Morena. So I am an aging young woman, and I would say my main background is I started in advertising. I spent 30 years in advertising, initially in the creative environment, and I worked on a lot of liquor brands. In fact, many years ago at Stellenbosch Farmers Wineries, launching some of the old brands like Esprit, Fifth Avenue Cold Duck, the Grasser. So many years ago, and I moved from that environment, staying in liquor industry for a long time with advertising agencies, working on liquor brands, and I started my own agency. For many years I was in business-to-business communications, and then in sort of the later years I spent a lot of time in retail advertising as a retail strategist, running big retail accounts like Pick n Pay, ShopRite Checkers, Game Account, Woolworths, through some of the big agencies. I worked for a couple of very big agencies here in Cape Town. And then I decided to get out of the advertising industry, and I decided to get into the marketing environment. And I put myself out there on BizCom, and within a couple of days I received some calls and was pretty much headhunted through some of the contacts that I had, like Mike Bosman, who had been in the advertising industry, who I'd worked for, who'd got into the wine industry now. And there was some network, and I got approached at that time by Constellation Wines, who called me to come and have an interview to get involved with the launching their brands, which were essentially, it was a new investment. They had bought Flagstone Wine, and they needed to sell the brand in an export market, and they were looking for someone to put it on the map in terms of a marketing role and building the brand. And I had an interview with Bruce Jack and James Reed, at that time Constellation, and I worked there for 13 years. We went through three buyouts, but for 13 years that was where I was based.
That's a really interesting journey that you've taken, and today you sit here as a brand owner, and Nalu is not a winery itself. It is a brand that you've created from scratch. Tell me, how did that begin?
Yeah, through default, actually. At the beginning, the end of 2020, as we came out of, obviously, the COVID period, what we found was that we were in a situation, we had been changed from Constellation Wine to Accolade Wine during my time there, and at the end of 2019, a large corporate company called the Carlyle Group bought out the Accolade business, and during 2020 they did a lot of restructuring. I actually sat in the EMEA team, and my role was to sell the South African portfolio of wines, so I had a global brand position, and I was also in charge of local sales for South Africa and Africa, and marketing, but my key background was marketing. So when they did a restructure, the whole business changed, and essentially it changed to a more sales-focused role, which wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do, which wasn't my strength. And a lot of the people in my actual team were retrenched, who were salespeople. So those people contacted me in the various markets and said to me, gee, Ali, you've got this network, you're in marketing, you create brands, why don't we create a virtual brand and look for a name and create a brand, and we'll sell it into the markets where we have the relationships. Because the key issue is people buy wine from people. It's all about relationships. Myself and the team had amazing relationships, and in all these various export markets we had very strong relationships. So the first partnership that we set up was actually an opportunity that came up for us in Russia. So we started to look for a name to create for the brand. And during 2020, at that time, my son had been waiting to get on the yachts, and it hadn't transpired due to COVID. So he'd created a little pop-up health bar in Hout Bay called Nalu Juice and Health Bar. And when you set up a business, whether it's whatever business it is, you have to go and CIPRA and do all the paperwork in the back end and create this entire business and do all the food and health and safety part of the business. So he'd set that up for 6 months, and in January of 2021, he was the last time he was actually going to run the pop-up. And then he said to me, Mom, I'm going back on the yachts now. So we wound down the business. And during that time, I was actually looking for a virtual brand and started to go through the system and look for names. And in reality, there is nothing in the world other than music that has more SKUs than wine. So it's quite a process to actually find a name. And eventually we managed to see if we could register Nalu as Nalu Wines, and to my surprise it came up. Nalu actually is a Hawaiian word. My son's a big surfer, and anybody in the surfing industry knows it, and all the kids, anybody that's interested in anything to do with the ocean knows what it means. It's a Hawaiian word that means surf or surge. So I was super surprised that it wasn't registered here in South Africa. So we registered the name, and I started to look for opportunities on who to work with and where to source the actual brand. And I'd worked with Ben Jordan, who was our winemaker for a long time at Accolade Wines. He was the Kamala winemaker, which is the biggest export brand in the world out of South Africa. And so Ben and I had been chatting. He works for Cape Wine Exporters, which is part of the Journey's End group with Rolo Gab. And so the opportunity was there for me to source and produce, and I needed a partner, obviously, on the export business, so I approached them. So we pitched a concept, and with the Nalu brand, we were looking for something that was a bit different and had meaning. I think everything, your brand, being a marketeer and being in advertising, it's about finding the packaging needs to look beautiful, the story needs to have empathy, and my son, with it being linked around the ocean, it was really important to him that I did something philanthropic. So after quite a lot of conversations, we eventually found a partner through Mareka Masson, who was the curator at Two Oceans Aquarium. I went to see her and said, look, I've got this idea, showed her some drawings and said, we'd like to tie in and give something back to the Turtle Foundation. It's going to take a long time before we make real money, but as a marketeer, we can do a lot of talking about the turtles. And that was really how it sort of came out. And we presented the concept on storyboards and the labels to a customer in Russia. And within a month, we had feedback and we had our first big order. And so that was pretty much from May last year where the business started. But as you can imagine, with the Russian market, it's quite in a different space now.
It definitely has taken a bit of a turn from that perspective. But I'm sure you are present in other markets by now.
So I'm working with some partnerships. We have sent some wine into Africa. So we're doing a bit of wine into Namibia. We've done presentations into Zimbabwe, and we are pitching to a couple of bigger markets, but it's been quite a challenge. But obviously I also sell into South Africa as a result of, getting the pitch out there and getting the brand out there. Was approached by some distributors locally who I had strong relationships with. And so it wasn't really the focus. The focus was very much in the export, and it is the focus. But, I know from being at Accolade Wine is that your export market wants to know that you do sell your wine in your own home origin market. They want to know that it's trusted when you talk about the brand. So the journey started, just to get out there and get into the on-trade and build those relationships that I'd been working with people in the on-trade for a long time, and with the redistributors and distributor partnerships. So that was pretty much where we started.
And production-wise, what is your total annual production? Are you scaling up? Or where are you at?
So because we pretty much make to order based on the presentation, we have done, the first order was about 10,500 cases, and our second order was another 10,500 cases, so we've done pretty well. just in terms of in sort of the first 8 months of business. And the plan is to partner up with specific producers that make wine specifically. We're not tied into any one producer, and that's key to the business, because we're selling a concept and a brand, and we can fill the wine based on what the market wants. And as you know, the market in South Africa is pretty saturated, and I've got strong relationships. So we started working with Cape Wine, and our first fills were through Swartland. We had sourced wine and grapes out of the Swartland area and bottled at Swartland. But we're staying in the Swartland area, but we're looking at some other producers. I've got some partnerships in terms of creating the wine that's very specific for the market. So in Africa, there's a style which is a lot fruitier, more sweeter style wine, so we can go and look for those products and make to order. In South Africa, the Swartland wines have done well for us in terms of the Sauvignon Blancs and the Merlots. It's also quite a fruit-driven market in that kind of price category. But I'm talking to some of the premium wineries as well, because I have very strong relationships with the duty-free market. So there's opportunities to bring in some sort of halo products, and we're busy talking. So that's the unique thing about Nalu, is that I'm not tied into any one specific area. We can actually go out there and find a partner in terms of a producer to make to order, and leverage off the strong relationships that I have in the various markets.
It's almost like haute couture wine, designed specifically for that person or that market in this case. Something that's really unique, but it really appeals to the market and the demand that exists at the time. So, getting over to you, do you have a memory specifically pertaining to wine when you maybe had a wine that kind of made you think a little bit more about what you were consuming?
Sure. I started drinking wine quite young. I was actually born in Zambia and raised in Zimbabwe, and I moved to Durban when I turned 18, and I was a designer. I had studied fine art. I left school when I was young and did graphic design, and my first job was for Hedley Burn Young in Rubicam, and I caught a 48-hour bus from Salisbury all the way down to Durban, and I went and applied, and I got a job in an ad agency there in Pick n Pay hypermarket. The Pick n Pay group was our business. And I had never really been big into wine in Zimbabwe. My parents used to drink demi-johns of wine that they used to get from Byra, which also used to leave a bit of a hangover and a rough taste in your mouth. So I think that the first experience of wine was like drinking, like everyone. You start that journey with sort of Niederberg kind of sweet late harvest wine as your first we were in our early sort of 1820s. I've always been a fan of white wine. I think over the years I progressed, and I liked a lot of Sauvignon Blancs and Chennons. I do drink red wine, but my preference is white wines. But in terms of brands, lots of brands. I mean, I've worked obviously with being in the Accolade portfolio. I've had the opportunity to travel, and so I've worked in many international markets, so exposed to various brands. But I always come back to some of my favorite wineries in South Africa, and there's pretty much a winery in every region that I have a passion for. So, yeah.
And you mentioned traveling internationally. Are there any wines that you might have enjoyed along your travels that really stood out for you? And I know here that wine often, there's a lot more than just the wine. It's the environment, the scenery, the company, that kind of thing. But is there one that maybe just like really has a very special memory?
Well, there's two actually. I'm a big fan of Prosecco. I love Italy. I'm married to an Italian, and so we have been lucky enough to have inherited a very old property in Udine Friuli, which is near the Prosecco Valley. So I am a big fan of Prosecco, but I'm also a big fan of Sauvignon Blanc. So of course that would take me to New Zealand. At Accolade, I did work on a couple of really nice New Zealand brands, and I spent some time in Marlborough. And I would say, good New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc goes a long way.
Very satisfying for sure. So, what is the most expensive of all Nalu's wines?
So at the moment, all the wines that we have are wines produced sort of entry-level wines for the main market, specifically because we produced for Russia. It was a price point that we had to hit. So all the wines are sort of retailing at around 80, 90 Rand, so entry level. But I'm busy doing some producer tastings at the moment, and we're hoping to bring out another level of wines closer to sort of 150. But the Nalu range that we have at the moment, they're all just around 80 Rand.
And from the Nalu range currently, which is your favourite? I know you can't ask a parent what their favourite child is, but there must be one that kind of stands out just a little bit.
Of course, it's going to be the Sauvignon Blanc. As a Sauvignon Blanc drinker, I love the Sauvignon Blanc. It's a crisp, easy to drink wine. It's well balanced. Not too much acidity. Obviously, with the Swartland wine, it's a bit forward fruit on it. And, the palate was to make something that sort of price point that works in the mainstream market. And it's fresh, easy to drink, so that, and actually I'm not a big rosé fan, but more recently I've been drinking quite a bit of rosé, spending time in the south of France. As you know, a lot of people drink rosé, and actually the rosé is quite pleasant as well.
Oh, I must say I've just spent a little bit of time in the south of France, and I just decided when in the south of France you have to drink rosé. So I had quite a lot of rosé, and it really is a pleasant drink to enjoy, especially in that environment. So I think I might also be slightly turning into a rosé convert. Do you believe in the perfect variety?
Not particularly. I think that we have such a broad region of wines. Funny enough, having worked with Flagstone for so long, I'm a big Pinotage fan. My preference in drinking red wine was to go and seek out a good Pinotage on that, and I suppose that was always putting my South African colours out there when travelling and representing the South African portfolio in a predominantly Australian-driven business. They were always sort of pushing Barossa Valley Shiraz and the Adelaide and Barossa Chardonnays, and Australia sort of has the mainstream drive around that, whereas with us in South Africa, I think that we have the uniqueness of having Chenin and Pinotage, and it's something that we kind of need to earn and get out there and pitch as our global uniqueness. And I'm a fan of Pinotage, good Pinotage. Obviously, Pinotage has taken over the years a bit of slices from various markets, but I think generally we've moved a long way, and I think there are some beautiful wines to be found, and that would be something I'd be looking at definitely having at a premium level.
Mm-hmm. So my next question is always an interesting one because it's fairly contentious, but you're not a winemaker, so you're more of a marketer, brand owner, and I think you think of it slightly differently. But I'd love to know your opinion on wine scoring, wine critics, competitions, that kind of thing. Do you think they have a place?
I do. I think that generally the consumer is overwhelmed by the wine industry. It feels scary and it is quite complicated. I think that as passionate as winemakers are, when they go and present their products in the market to the layman, they sometimes make it even more frightening because they talk about terroir and cultivars and blending and soil and all sorts of things that the mainstream consumer finds extremely overwhelming. So I do think that with the competitions, what happens is that it proves to the layman that people that are in the know, that have knowledge, have tasted these wines and they've given it a stamp of approval. So when they go out and look for wines and they see it on a shelf, they don't need to understand all the background If they see the fact that this wine has got a couple of gold or silver medals on, it's good enough for them. It shows an endorsement, and if it's out there, and even the less fancy competitions, those which are sort of the mainstream kind of retailer competitions, where they say, the ultra liquors, for instance, they used to run the under 50s, under 100s, and give accolades to those. I think those work because they give the consumer some insight on the product that they don't necessarily have. And I actually was in the township doing a tasting last week at the old Mzoli's. It's now called Teas, and I had all the staff there that were having a conversation with me, and so I was talking to them pretty much in my layman terms, not fancy wine talking terms, brand terms, and giving them some colourful insight on why Nalu should be fun in their market. And just giving basic insight, like simple information. Even although they've had 7 or 8 winemaker presentations, they find they are just too complicated. And so just keeping the information simple, like explaining the basic things like what does vintage mean, and what is a single cultivar, understanding that kind of thing. I think that education's important in our growing markets, and we need to invest more into doing that. And I think that's really important. And I do think that the accolades are good because they help, the differentiate on shelf for the customer what the market actually likes and doesn't like. But I don't think it's the be end. Everyone has their own taste and palate, and what one person likes is not necessary for the other person.
Yeah, for sure. And I must say, I totally agree with your point on education, especially within the African markets. I think the opportunity is certainly there, and one that we really can do so much with in South Africa, and certainly the wider African market. Wine pairing. It's something that everyone talks about. It's something that many people do. Some get it very right and others get it very wrong. Do you have a wine pairing recipe or a standard, or is it something that you think is more trial and error?
Definitely not on Nalu. I mean, Nalu is quaffing wines. Nalu wines are made to drink in a big glass with ice if you prefer on a summer's day. The current range, there's nothing pretentious or, overly, no overthinking on the current range. At the moment, I'm looking for the Nalu signature range, which would then be more premium wines, looking for those perfect pairings. I think that, the pairings are pretty basic, but I do know that if you are a serious winer, I'm not talking about the mainstream, your pairing experience is phenomenal. And I'll have to put my hand up and say I had the most incredible food pairing experience. Probably I've done many all over the world, and one of my favorite I did last week at Creation, and it was an outstanding food and wine pairing experience. And to me, when people do it right, it's phenomenal. But I'm not going to pretend that Nalu is in the wine pairing space at this stage. We're definitely in the quaffing space.
Fair enough. And ultimately, it's about what's nice for you at that particular point in time. And if what's in your glass is ticking the boxes, then that's what it's about. I'm going to be assumptive here. And I'm going to assume that you might have had 1 or 2 glasses of wine too many on the odd occasion. Do you have a hangover cure for our listeners that you think works?
Do I have to earn that? He definitely had a few too much to drink. I think a big breakfast is the best thing. I think I must say, as a woman in the liquor industry and having been in it for a very long time, you have to go out there and stand up with the boys. But I always try and stay one step ahead and not have one too many, because I think that businesses are more forgiving of drunk men than they are of drunk women. So I would say I still think if we've had that 1 or 2 glasses too many, there's nothing like a good fry-up breakfast in the morning.
Definitely. And I must say, it's interesting. I think certainly I feel it. The older I get, the worse the recovery after a big night out. So you do try and avoid it at all costs. And I think we've all paid our school fees in our younger days of learning when to stop or not, not knowing when to stop. When you were little, what did you want to be?
A ballerina. I'm 6'1". I was pretty much 6'1" when I was 13 years old, so I'm very tall. I was very slim and I always wanted to be a ballerina. And then as I got sort of into my teens, I discovered art and that I was actually really good at that, and that it was easier to follow a passion that you're good at than to try and work on something you're not quite as good at. I think that I just followed my heart, and passion was to do something artistic, and that was why I got into the art and design. And that's still my passion. Anything to do with creative, interiors, fashion trends, anything design trends, it's my passion. So although it's come out, and the art of making wine is a very creative environment to be in, just packaging, labels, everything is a creative space. And so for me, I try and stay always in something in the creative space, and I enjoy it. And I think that I think when you have a gift, it sort of takes you in that direction, and I've been very lucky to have been able to stay in an environment that I enjoy.
Well, they say if you enjoy what you do, you don't have to work a day in your life.
Too true.
Mm-hmm. And tell me, Alison, when you're not working, what do you do in your free time?
Travel. I live for travel, love to travel, read travel blogs, look at beautiful places, follow interior design, fashion, and I love the sunshine. Summer you'll find me on a beach. I live in Hout Bay, so at Llandudno or Hout Beach most weekends in the summer. And I'm an outdoor person, like to be outside in the sunshine. And I basically live from holiday to holiday so that I can experience some new culture or love to travel. That's my absolute passion.
Well, one of the best tips I've ever received was to, once you finish a holiday, you start planning the next one, because then you've got something to plan for and to look forward to. Speaking about trips, if you had to go to a deserted island and you could only take 3 bottles of wine with you, what would you take? Anything.
Wow. Well, I would definitely have to take one of my favorite New Zealand wines, a Sauvignon Blanc. I'm not particularly sure which brand it would be, but I definitely think I would take a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, and probably the Creation Sauvignon Blanc. I had tasted a couple of times recently, and probably a Bruce Jack Shannon or a Secatier Shannon or something. I would like to have 3 good white wines. They wouldn't last long though, because if I was on a sunny island, they'd be quaffed down quite quickly, but that would be my choice.
Let's hope it's just like a weekend break and not much longer than that. Alison, are you into music? Is that something that forms part of your life? And if so, any particular groups or genres or artists that really do it for you?
I love music. I'm still sort of stuck in the good old 70s. I love listening to things like Jim Croce and James Taylor and some of those old genre music. Anything, most music. I'm a big music fan. I listen to my old CDs on weekends sometimes. In fact, this past weekend I was doing a lot of lick and sticking, because when you are one woman business, you do everything from labeling to unlabeling to carrying to selling to creating. And I had a project and I was putting all the labels on, and I was listening some good old-fashioned 70s chill music.
Nice.
And enjoy it.
And movies, is that something that you're into?
Totally. I'm an absolute movie addict. I probably watch a good movie at least once a night. I'm a reality series fan, so I watch every Survivor that comes out. I actually like a good old soppy movie. I watched Purple Hearts the other night and had a good cry. I'm a big softie when it comes to movies. I watch a lot of documentaries. Just recently watched Home to Home and a couple of The River Runner and a couple of adventure kind of series. I'm a big movie addict and also went to see Top Gun that opened. Loved that. So Tom never seems to age for some unknown reason.
Not at all. It's incredible, actually, how many of the people I've spoken to within this series of podcasts who've just brought up Top Gun, and I think that, it really speaks to a generation of people who had the original Top Gun and couldn't wait to see the follow-up, and I don't think anyone was let down in any way at all. What was the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Wow. I would say probably anything my mom says, which is always live your passion. Whatever you do, put your heart into it. Some things fail, some things succeed, but if you're doing as you said, if you're doing what you love and you put your heart in, then it doesn't matter, does it? So I think that, and just do your best. You never know if you don't give it a go.
Yeah.
That's the key thing. If you don't try, how do you know whether you're going to fail or succeed? But my parents were always pushed us to get out there, give it a go, take a chance. 50% of the time it works and 50% it doesn't, but enjoy the journey.
And even that 50% of the time when it doesn't, there might be lessons learned along the way that can help you for the next adventure that you pursue. Complete the sentence. A table without wine is like.
Wow. It's like a hot dessert without ice cream.
I like that one. That's a new one. I haven't heard that one yet. Okay. Tell me, what kind of wines do you think we'll be drinking in 2,000 years' time?
Gee whiz. We'll be drinking probably the same wines, aged. I think that if you have a look at what's going on. So South Africa, if you look at us, we're sort of a combination of an old world, new world. And when you look at the wines that are coming out of the old world, they haven't necessarily evolved massively in terms of stylistically, but the way we're making wine has evolved and the way wine ages. And I think that's important. I think that it's an art, and that making wine, we will just perfect it more, but I think that you'll always stick to the root of what's important and keep the basics right. I don't think I'm enough of a wine visionary to be able to think of anything completely out of the box, but hopefully we're still drinking nice, fresh, good quality white wines and lots of nice, good aged, fruit-forward reds, and maybe we've got some incredible pinotages by then that go up against some of the world's best cabs.
That's a nice thought. I like that one a lot. Tell me, as a traveller, is there a winemaking area in the world that you still really want to explore?
I'd like to go and spend some time in the Napa Valley. I have been in and out of California during my travels, but I've never spent good quality time in the Napa Valley. I spent quite a bit of time in Europe. I've spent a lot of time in South Africa, a lot of time in Australia, New Zealand, so a lot of New World. But I would say I'm a fan of New World wine, and I would say probably the Napa Valley is somewhere I'd like to spend some time. I met some incredibly good female winemakers in my journey working at Accolade, and I'd like to catch up with those girls and go and have a look at some of their areas. They've excited me about the opportunities of what's going there, and hopefully they survive the fires that are happening in California, but I'd definitely like to spend some time in the Napa Valley.
I think it's a very interesting part of the world from a wine perspective, from many perspectives actually. So you can read tea leaves in a cup. If you could read the sediment in the bottom of a red wine glass, what would that sediment say about Nalu?
Wow. It would say that Nalu is going to grow from strength to strength as basically a everyday brand that people recognize as doing something good. And every bottle that we sell, we give something back to the Turtle Foundation, and the drive is not necessarily we're not going to compete as the most extravagant award-winning wine, but it's a beautiful brand, the packaging is gorgeous, and the people behind it that I work with are all stunning and supportive. And I think that it's a brand that I'd like to pass down to my kids, and maybe they will do something with it. And certainly it'll be about the philanthropic side. It'll be about giving back. And, whether it is around doing something with the ocean, or we've done a couple of projects with the dog. And, for many years I worked with Pink Drive and breast cancer awareness. So for me, everything that you do has to be linked to giving back. And I see that in long term will be important for the brand and in what direction we go. The key motivation is to keep the brand focused on its positioning, which is around rooted in nature, and stay true to that in terms of design and development. And I think if I could see, we need to get that Russian war sorted out so we could get those big sales back going and open up some of those markets again, and get back on track. I think it's been a tough year for everyone in the wine industry, and tough couple of years, and I feel that there's a number of markets, cracking the UK market is a big wine market, but that's all about who and the right connections. And, obviously the Asian market's also wide open, but I think it's very competitive and it's got lots of complexity. So, finding those niche little opportunities and keep ploughing away and digging in with those little on-trade wins. Every new restaurant that puts Nalu down on a menu is a big win for me. So just doing it, chipping away bit by bit, basically.
And the philanthropic side, the Turtle Foundation. Tell me a bit more about that.
So Two Oceans Aquarium has a whole rehab facility where they are helping rehabilitate turtles that have been brought in from the ocean, or hatchlings that are struggling, and the public can basically get in touch with them. And it's a whole educational program. So they do the rehabilitation, they take the hatchlings in, and they help them get to a stage where they can live on their own, and then they release them back into the ocean, and they have trackers on them, and they have a number of turtles that have travelled all across the world. We have released loads of turtles in the last couple of years, and they just do good things. And I think that awareness is huge, and education, and I think that Two Oceans Aquarium Foundation does incredible things around the ocean, and especially along our Western Cape coasts, and with lots of fracking going on, and more and more space being, land being damaged, and beaches being damaged, more and more hatchlings that we're losing, and the survival rate's very low for these turtles. And so I think that, everybody talking about it, every little thing that you give back is important. And, it was more something close to my son's heart, but now that I've taken on the project, it's become something quite close to my heart. And it's actually an amazing project and team that work there, and it's definitely something we want to be more involved in.
And a really worthy cause, I think. They're endangered, aren't they?
Well, it's something like one or two in every few hundred hatchlings that survive, and they're certain. Some of the greenbacks and loggerheads, the turtles are at a stage where they need to start being protected because they will become endangered. But they're doing amazing things, and the awareness is great. And I think that the education side is huge. The projects that they run and the people involved are very passionate. It's amazing.
Very, very cool. So, Alison, before we finish off, we're going to play a game. And the game goes like this. I name 3 varieties, and you pair each variety with a song or a music artist or even a genre that you think represents this variety. So I think because you're such a Sauvignon Blanc lover, I think it would be wrong not to bring Sauvignon Blanc into this.
Wow. You got me on the go here. Right. Sauvignon Blanc is all about good times, fun, and sunshine, and being with your girlfriend. So I suppose I have to, how about pair that with ABBA? Yes. Mamma Mia in Greece.
Yes, I love that one. Very, very cool. And of course, one that got quite a lot of mentions was Pinotage.
Oh, Pinotage, yeah. Nice and moody, good winter warmer. How about a little bit of reggae, some good old-fashioned UB40 or something like that, or a bit of Bob Marley?
Yeah, I can see that working very, very well. Let's end off with Cabernet Sauvignon.
Cab. Okay, so Cab is big mouthfeel, always a lot drier than most of the other red wines, more complexity. Wow, I'd have to go with maybe one of my old favorites, something like Rodriguez or something like that.
Oh, that's nice. I like that one as well. Very, very cool. Alison, thank you so much for joining us today. Would you like to remind our listeners just where they could find Nalu Wines online, on social media, and get some more information?
Sure, thank you. So it's www.naluwines.com. You'll find our website. We have everything available online. Our distribution partner, Norman Goodfellows. We have our wines in all the stores. It's online in the online shop in Norman Goodfellows. We're online at ShopRite Checkers. In all the social media, Nalu Wines on Instagram, Nalu Wines on Facebook and LinkedIn. And you can find me, Alison Pearce, and contact me directly. If you go to the website, my contact number is online there too as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alison, for the time today, and I hope to see you soon.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack South Africa. For details and updates, visit our website winesoundtrack.com.